Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information, learning resources, tools and much more.
Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. This is episode 2 of 2, and I'm delighted to introduce John Whitlow and Harriet Wallace from Imperial College. And in this episode, they're going to be talking about Scope 3 carbon emissions. I guess as well, Harriet, you mentioned the way that you measure your Scope 3 at the moment using financial data. That's always for me kind of the first step in terms of getting some idea of what your Scope 3 footprint looks like. But eventually, presumably, you're going to want to move to collecting real data from your suppliers on their carbon. How do you see that progressing? It's obviously, as you say, early stages yet, but how might you see that working going forward?
So it would be great to have a more precise approach than the spend times emissions factor approach. And I know there's some great initiatives exploring that. So, for example, the work Nottingham Trent have been doing with Net Positive and others is trying to collect that sort of more accurate data already. So I think everybody wants to move in that direction. The real challenge is that often suppliers only have Scope 1 and 2 data. They don't have Scope 3. So if you take their data on their carbon footprint and your proportional responsibility for it, you're missing their Scope 3. So I do worry about the maturity of the data there. So, for example, you might have seen recently that Microsoft had their carbon footprint increase hugely because they were building more data centers, and that was their Scope 3. But they're measuring it because they're quite far advanced in their work. But regulatory requirements are only to report Scope 1 and 2. So I would love to be able to move to supplier data, but I worry that it's only very partial at the moment. We'll find out as we do our supplier engagement what exists and how good it is, and then we're going to have to look at what's possible. But it's a real challenge because if you take the spend-based approach, then we might actually reduce our real-world impact quite a lot, but we wouldn't be able to show it in the data. It's one of the things we're going to work through. One of the lovely things about being at Imperial, though, is we've got lots of smart people who know about methodologies. And we've already done quite a lot by having various PhD students intern in the team and help us with the analysis. So our Scope 3 analysis was done by a PhD student. So once we've got better data, we will be able to find smart brains to look at it and work out what we can do with it. And we'll just have to see what we can do at that stage.
Yeah, it's very much a journey with the supply chain, and certainly in my experience, as you say, to get a complete data set from a supplier, a complete Scope 3 in particular, is very, very unusual. We have done one of these podcasts with quite a niche company of cleaning and janitorial products, and they, I believe them when they tell me they've actually nailed their Scope 3, but very, very few organisations have. So it's a long, long way to go. So in terms of the challenges, we've talked quite a lot about Scope 3. We talk about maybe getting data going forward. How do you see the future? How do you see kind of implementing some of these thoughts through your procurement process?
We're going to adopt a fairly pragmatic and practical approach at the university. That's how we like to work and try and keep it as simple as possible, Sean, really. So we recognise that engaging with our suppliers is going to be key. Getting the message across is going to be key, and sustaining that, for quite a period of time is also going to be key as well. So that's the approach we're thinking about. We're obviously looking at the major areas of spend versus obviously carbon that we highlighted earlier in the conversation, and we'll work with those key supply chain partners and suppliers to work through all of the credentials that we aim to collect, including data. And I recognise the data challenge that we have, not only as purchasers, but obviously the suppliers will have equally the same issues. And it is a journey, I think, Sean, for those suppliers. When you look at any common data needs across industries and across different areas, it's always a challenge to get a common approach. So hopefully we can help influence some of that work with our supply chain partners as well. So we're going to focus in on our top 150 suppliers to begin with. And the approach is very much to send them a request for some further information initially, look at the responses we have back, assess those responses in some detail. Also, we're very keen, we were talking about this yesterday, is look at some of the opportunities that might arise. We're hoping our suppliers will be forthcoming with information, but also be prepared to offer some potential solutions to supporting the work we're doing here. I suppose suppliers will see it inevitably as an opportunity to maybe potentially do more business or alternative business with us. So we're very keen to foster that general approach to it being a partnership, and it being a win for both us as an organisation and for our suppliers. And hopefully those suppliers will then see that as a massively important way to promote their business to other key universities within the sector as well. So there are sort of benefits both sides. So we'll be impressing upon our suppliers that those benefits are there to be achieved, and that we'll make sure we'll work continually with them. We see this as an initial approach to our top suppliers, but we'll work our way through our supply base from head to toe and make sure that we work in the most practical way with those supply chain partners. But we've got to be sensible as well that there's only so much we can bite off at this point in time, and where can we make the biggest impact in a relatively short period of time. So that's our general approach to how we're going to approach this.
And I think you're starting to apply weighting factors to your tenders for sustainability. Is that right?
Yes, we are. So the intention is for our sort of higher value, bigger procurements, we're going to apply a 20% weighting to the evaluation criteria. And for all the other sort of medium to smaller type purchases that we make, we're going to apply a 10% weighting to those evaluations. So yes, we think that's a practical sort of level to start with. Obviously, as time progresses, we'll continue to review those weightings, but that's where we're starting from, and we'll obviously need to make sure that that weighting criteria is evaluated, carefully, and that suppliers are aware that's coming. So in our messaging to our supply base, we'll be making it very clear if they don't read our policies and strategy documents and the actions we're going to take, then we'll make sure that we get that information out to suppliers as soon as we can, so they're prepared.
Because as I understand it, you've recently launched or about to launch a sustainable procurement policy.
Yes, correct. And we'd like to thank Action Sustainability for playing their part in developing that strategy and policy. We worked very closely with Mel from the team to support our thinking in terms of how it was best to go about developing the strategy and using the many examples of good practice that Action Sustainability have available to them. We also compared and contrasted our draft approach with some of our peers within the university sector to make sure that we were at least as good as, if not better than, our peers. But that was very much our thinking as well. And then making sure that once the strategy got approved, we obviously made sure we socialised that draft strategy and policy across the university to make sure that we had good buy-in and potential ownership in the future. And that went to the relevant committee on sustainability to get that approved in the first instance, and went all the way up to our university management board to be assessed and approved in due course. So yes, it's brilliant that we've got a new strategy and policy in place, and also we've got terrific guidance and information available now to both our central teams and to colleagues and staff around the universities and students as well, so that they can see that this is an area that we're going to excel in future, and one which we'll be very proud of.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that you made earlier about, your suppliers need to be aware of what's coming. Because certainly I've just worked out in my head when you said you've been in procurement. Well, I said you've been in procurement for longer than me. I think I've been 39 years in total in procurement. I started in the mid-80s. But yeah, if you give a supplier a surprise, then the chances are they'll put the price up. And so that early communication is really important and critical. How did the internal approval process go? Because I often find with developing these things, they're quite tricky to draft, and then it takes about 3 times as long to actually get it socialized, as you say, around the organization and people's various different comments and opinions. How did that go for you?
It was quite smooth for us, actually. I think it gave people a lot of confidence that it was a combined effort between the procurement team and the sustainability team and Action Sustainability, who work with a lot of different organisations on this. And there is a lot of support for the sustainability work within Imperial across both academics and professional services teams. So actually, once we shared what we thought was a good draft, there's been a lot of support. We had some really smart questions about how to make it practical and how to make sure that we weren't adding extra work, but we were rather adapting our existing procurement processes. I think it helped a lot that a lot of the legwork will be led by John and team in the central procurement. So the message to the rest of the organisation is don't worry, the procurement team have got this. And we've also, with the help of Action Sustainability, we've trained up the category managers in the central team and the major purchasers in some of the other areas. So, for example, our IT department and our catering department do their own purchasing. So we've trained up people there. We've trained somebody up in each of the faculties. So we've now got a small group of internal experts who can help with the implementation. So far so good, but obviously a lot of work to do in the implementation, and we'll hopefully it will go really smoothly, but I'm sure we'll learn a lot, and there might be things that we need to tweak as we go, as we learn what works best and what doesn't maybe work so well.
One other thing we're doing as well, just to add to that, is we recognise that in the early phases of this work, we're going to need to ensure that we've got sufficient bandwidth to take on all of this work. So we are looking to recruit an extra person to work alongside Harriet's team within the procurement team, whose principal focus will be on sustainable procurement and working closely not only with each of the category managers and those individuals that Harriet's just mentioned that have been trained, but more widely across the community, so that if people do need more help or more guidance, then we've got a full-time resource available to us in addition to the other people who will be working on this to make sure we achieve what we want to achieve. So that's been recognised, and it was good of the University Management Board when we went up and spoke to them. They said, "Are you well sort of prepared and resourced for this?" So this was something that was on their mind as well. So fortunately, we had thought about that beforehand and are now looking to find a suitable candidate to help us move this forward.
That's really key, and with all of the organisations that I've worked with over the years to try and do this, you need somebody internally to drive it. A few years ago, I would have said, "Oh, good luck with that, finding a sustainable procurement expert," because there are very few of them, and quite a lot of them work for me. And it's getting better. There is more expertise out there now, so I'd be really interested to know how that recruitment process goes for you, because it's still quite a rare skill to have that procurement expertise and the sustainability side as well. Okay, so final question, if I can. There are a lot of universities around the world, and what we try to do in ISO 2400.org is to build the body of knowledge around the world in sustainable procurement. So if there's anybody out there listening to your podcast from your sector that's starting on their journey, what would your advice be to them?
I don't mind starting. From a procurement perspective, be bold, of course. It's good to be bold, but be sensible and reasonable about what you feel you can do in the shorter term. So make sure you can get decent results, but don't overcommit, because especially when you talk to your suppliers, because they'll see through that fairly quickly, to be honest with you. And I think that will undermine what you're looking to achieve. So I think sometimes it's easy to start with some early wins and low-hanging fruit, and that's my sort of practical advice to colleagues elsewhere. Make sure you tap into expertise like we have with Action Sustainability. There's some fantastic resources out there, and people are only more than happy to help, as we are. Obviously, we're working closely with our colleagues within the sector, and we're always delighted to share experience and knowledge and provide some practical help where we can. But we know our sort of time is limited as well, but we're always happy to do that.
Brilliant. So yeah, start simple and plunder as much information from others as you can. Harriet, anything to add from your perspective?
I mean, I think the most important thing is to start, actually. There aren't perfect ways to do this. There isn't perfect information. So for me, it's about finding out what we do know and starting in the areas that look like the places where we can make the biggest impact, and then working through it and not feeling scared to begin, because as you say, Sean, that the world isn't full of sustainable procurement experts, but it's full of lots of people trying to do better on this. And so what matters is that none of us are afraid to have a sensible go at it. And it can be as simple as asking our suppliers where they are on their journey and how they're going to get better. And when we tender, asking what can they tell us about the impact of their products and services. And the more organisations do that and have those conversations, the better we're all going to get at it. I've really noticed that in sustainability and higher education, people are generous with sharing their knowledge because there is a commitment for all of us to get better. So you can absolutely ask people for help. And actually, a lot of suppliers want to get better at this too. So I would just say, get started, don't be scared. We're all learning and we'll all get better at it in time.
Brilliant. That's a great message to end on. Thank you very much, both of you. I think this has been fascinating, and we've spoken in this podcast series to a variety of people in the sort of laboratory, HE, health sector, and about consumables and those sort of things. And one of the things I'd love to do in the future is get a group of you together to share some knowledge around that. So thank you both very much for your contribution. It's really appreciated. I'm sure our audience are going to love it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on Sense and Sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more content on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.